All right, welcome back to Zodiac Sunday. I'm Kenz.
And I'm that nerd, Allison.
And welcome to our
Spicy Book Nook.
So we left off with book 1.5. It's part 3 of As Told by the Boys.
Yep.
And the last chapter that we read was chapter 18.
Mm-hmm. The nymph attack.
The nymph attack. Yep. It was the aftermath of what had happened. And then Lance biting Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
And Darius was gone. We
Yep.
didn't know where he had went.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we're at right now.
Yep.
So,
starting off.
where did Darius go? Actually, before we go into this, I'm going to talk about my list of boys.
Okay.
At the top,
Uh-huh.
my Lance Orion. That man, I would do dirty things to him.
He also does some kinky things later, too.
Caleb Altair.
Mm-hmm.
And then Darius Acrux.
Yep.
I had said Seth and then Max.
And then Max.
We'll talk about that. At the end again. We'll go over that.
Does it change? Does the ranking change?
We'll talk about it.
Interesting.
Anyway,
Okay.
So moving into it. So Darius is like, I want to kill them nymphs. I know there's a nest that was really close to the city. Let's go find them.
Yep.
So Francesca goes with him because she's the one that needed to get him out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like very awkward for me, this chapter, because it was like almost like Francesca was like hitting on him. And I was like,
Yeah.
it was just weird, right? Because she's having sex with Lance. Like, why are you sitting here? I fucking Darius. And I get it. He's a good looking man, but like weird for me. It just made me feel awkward about her. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is he had her go get his motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
And she brought it back.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, nice bike. And he says, it's limited edition. They only made 30 of them. Throwback.
Mm-hmm.
The bike that Darcy stole.
Mm-hmm. Super limited edition.
There was only 30 of them. Is it the same? Maybe not necessarily the same exact bike, but like
the same
the
make?
same limited edition.
We haven't gotten there yet, but when Tori and Darius bond over bikes, it's super cute.
Like, I thought that was funny.
I mean, it is like a mirror world, so it might be the same make and model.
I just thought that was funny. Like, way to reference that again just by throwing that line in there. Like, he's got one of the 30 of the ones that she was stealing.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. But they bring the bike. They go. They find tracks. He chases them. He finds them. He finds the one with the limp. And he demolishes them. Kills them with dragonfire. Finds another cursed item. Still don't know why they have them, what they're doing with them. Destroys it. And then he goes looking for the rest of them. He's trying to find the nest.
Yep.
Can't find it. There's something that they did say that I'm not sure if that's like super important, but he says there were so many paths and so many ways that you could go. This made me think that it is a huge nest.
Of
Wherever it is, it's going to be a lot of them. I was actually really scared. Like, I knew that Darius was going to be fine, right? Because we were moving into like the next part of the book. Like, we read The Awakening. He was there. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, please don't like go into a situation where you can't handle yourself because you're angry.
Killed by nymphs.
Like, we don't want that to happen. And he goes back because he can't find any. And then his father calls him. He doesn't realize that it's his father calling him. He thinks it's Lance.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm fine, stop worrying. Then his dad goes, I'm not certain why you think I would be concerned for your welfare, but I assume it is because you are already aware that it is in jeopardy. And I was like, okay, dickwad.
Yeah.
And then he makes him
Come home. This, ugh.
So remember,
It gets rough.
this is the night after he went floozing around with Tori. All heirs did, except for Max. Max didn't touch either one of them. He was doing other things that we'll talk about in a second. But so he gets to his dad's house, and I almost cried during the scene.
These scenes.
It really like carved into my heart a little bit. And while I understand where Darius is coming from, he really pissed me off the rest of the book.
Yeah. It won't stop. It'll continue like that for a little bit.
Like, I understand. Anyway, okay, we're going to talk about it. So he gets in there and his dad has pulled up pictures and news articles because people were taking pictures of him and Tori and Darcy and Seth while they were dancing. Yeah. And Caleb with Tori. And his dad was livid.
Yeah.
Like, livid is an understatement. He pulled him into his office and then started going through the pictures on a big screen. The images changed again, and I really had to fight my surprise as I caught sight of Max standing on the bar with his shirt off and the navy scales of his siren order coating his dark skin. He had his pants unbuckled and his cock in his hands, and he used his water magic to make it rain over himself like he was taking part in a porn shoot. So, while they were dancing with them, Max was doing things on the bar.
Shoot on the bar.
And his dad like had brought up pictures of him and Tori as well from the news articles, and the way that they explained it was really disgusting.
His dad was such a dick. He's like, "Did you fuck her?" He goes, "Did you at least let her feel the power of a dragon between her thighs and the dominance of her kind, bending her to submit to our will? Did you take her body and use it like the beast you were born to be and force her to understand what it is to be owned by the king of all orders?"
And then Darius says, "We were just dancing." I ground out, hating the way he was talking about her and the lust-filled look in his eyes, which went with his words. Ew.
Disgusting. Like,
she's a kid. Being. We know that he was sleeping with Clara.
Yeah.
Which, yuck. Like, they had the bond, whatever. But he was still, like, indulging in that part with her. And he just is, like, a fucking creep. And then he goes on to, like, essentially saying he needed to demean the girls to be their slaves. And he says, well, if she's lucky, then she might make a good whore for the fire heir to fuck. You know, it wasn't so long ago that the rulers of this kingdom used to keep such pets. Pretty, useless little fae who were only good for one thing, kept close to their more powerful counterparts so that they could provide pleasures of the flesh whenever it was wanted. Perhaps, when you finish breaking the Vega twins, you and the other heirs could make use of them like that. Show the kingdom, time and again, that the only thing the daughters of the Savage King are good for is servicing their betters.
Disgusting.
Like, yuck. Why are you...
I hate him.
Why does he think the Savage King was worse?
You get the backstory.
But you know what I mean? Like, you're so pissed off and trying to shove these girls out because their dad was horrible.
He just wants power.
Lionel is disgusting and horrible, and you're his kid. Are you like that? Like
nobody else knows that side of Lionel Acrux, though.
It's because Darius doesn't tell anybody.
Yeah, because he puts on like a front. They're like a happy political family. He's one of the counselors, and nobody even questions what happens behind closed doors.
And then Darius is thinking, but Roxania Vega and her sister were not and never would be the kind of girls who would be forced into that kind of position, even if he really did want them to be. They were forged in fire and ice with the determination of a hurricane and the strength of the earth beneath our feet. Making them bow was never going to be as easy as he kept making it out it would be, and even the idea of me using Roxania for my own personal whore was laughable.
Roxana,
whatever. He has... I love that he already has that respect for her. She doesn't know that.
Yeah.
She does not know that. But I love that he already has that and is like knows what his dad is saying is wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoy that part of Darius. And then we go through and his dad
is like, well, where were you all night? Talking about.
Yes. And then his dad goes through and like, he goes, so he's talking about how Darius essentially like doesn't care about his punishments. And he says that he just doesn't care anymore, and he's like gotten so strong, and he says so strong that I think my punishments have become little more than a nuisance to you. He says they're not. So this happened right after he had Xavier brought into the room.
Yeah.
And Darius knew.
Mm-hmm.
He knew immediately what was about to happen.
Like, why is Xavier here?
And he says, he said, they're not. Please stop. Please just. So it occurred to me that you don't care enough for your own hide to do what it takes to keep it safe anymore. But the weakling, he cast a sneering look at Xavier, who I could barely even see beyond the ring of blazing red fire as he screamed and screamed. His dad is lighting him on fire.
He doesn't have
Literally
magic to stop. He's
burning his
burning
flesh. Him. He is not awakened yet. He won't let him get awakened. And he is
just burning him alive right now.
Burning him alive. And Darius is just sitting there smelling it and listening to his brother's screams while his dad is like using that against him. Mm-hmm. And he says, for some reason, you seem inclined to try and defend him. It isn't very fey of either of you, but I suppose it serves a purpose. And then Darius is giving him anything he wants to make it stop. And his dad just really wants the girls out.
Yeah. He said, you will strike at the Vegas harder than you ever have. No more tricks, no more games, no more trying to hurt their precious little feelings. I want them tested, pushed beyond the limits. I want you to strike at them hard enough to either force them from the academy or make it clear beyond the point of doubt that they are fey enough to stand against you. Either way, we need to know. And either way, you will do what it takes to achieve that goal. Do you understand me?
And then he kicks Xavier out. Xavier wants to stay with him, but Darius made him get out. Mm-hmm. And he is essentially talking about how he has to be strong. And he said, knowing he could see how much of me was just as rotten and vile as the man who had created us. But I had to be, because it was the only way that I could even hope to protect him from this ever happening again. So Darius is essentially talking about becoming like his dad. Because he now, to get the Vegas to go, he knows he's going to have to be as disgusting as his father is. And enjoy taking pleasure in hurting them more than just normal. And so Darius gets beaten by his dad. His dad beats him. And then he goes back to his room. Yep. And he says, I should have gone to see Xavier to apologize, explain something. But I was too ashamed, too fucking cowardly for that. So I headed for the door instead. He's like beating himself up in all ways. Like he is not giving himself a break. And that's really, really hard to see as well. Like this whole chapter, it was just
heartbreaking.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Lionel is just a disgusting man. And I feel for Darius, but I also think he's fucking stupid.
He needs to tell somebody.
You could tell somebody? You can fucking talk to the girls? Why are you not smart enough to know if you work fucking together? I guess it's because Faye, but like...
He works with the heirs just fine.
And he works with Lance.
Yeah.
Like, they make mention of this multiple times later, and we're going to talk about it, how, like, they all work together.
Yeah.
And they're like, our original purpose was to serve them. Yeah, motherfuckers. Why can't you just work with them now?
Yeah. Dumb.
If you help train them, they can 100% take down his dad. Which I'm assuming is going to happen.
Darius also shows up in Tori's room.
Yes.
As she's sleeping, and he kind of like watches over her for a little bit.
Well, hang on. It's literally right here. He said, I wondered how different our lives... Oh, this is after, actually.
So that part where he's like, I wonder what we could have been if we had grown up together. There's a part in the book where there's like a glimpse of what could have been with both Darius and Tori and Darcy and Lance, because their mom was a seer. So you get a little bit of backstory, and it is the cutest thing. I'll bring it back up when we get there. I think it's like book 5 maybe or 6, but so cute. So cute. What they could have been.
But it didn't happen like that. And anyway, he's like, no matter their intentions, even if they were as pure as a virgin beneath a blood moon, they'd never be able to rule the kingdom the way it deserved to be ruled. And I would never rescind my promise to give Solaria the best leaders it could get. How the fuck do you know that's you?
Yeah.
You disgusting fucking rotten little shit. Anyway.
Super like...
The Vegas had to go, and I had to make that happen. The hunger I felt for her was like an ache in my soul, and I could have sworn I felt the world tipping, leaning so that gravity was trying to tug me back through that door into that room. Motherfucker, you guys are stupid. And then the chapter ends with, I had a job to do, and I'd let my heart burn in payment for my brother's soul if that was what it took. So essentially, he's picking his brother over her.
Yeah.
Although he doesn't really realize it yet. I don't think that, like, how serious his actions are going to be.
Yeah.
And then we move into a Seth chapter. And Seth is just like, he's just a sex monster. That's all he wants.
He's
a
a wolf. Yeah.
Like,
he sleeps with his pack. They're
all
there
the time.
to serve him.
He just sleeps with everything around him, and he would sleep with all of the heirs if they would let him.
Yes, he would.
And so this is Seth right after, literally the day after he was dancing with Darcy. And he had taken a girl up to his room because Darcy had turned him down. She didn't want to sleep with him. And
he wakes up with all of his back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is thinking about her. He's like, I'd walked her upstairs, her hand on her lower back, her body leaning into mine. It had felt right in ways I was never going to understand. Me and her were something special. I couldn't figure out what it was yet. Stop.
You find out what it is.
Stop. I'm sure that. Okay. She was a challenge, and Caleb was all for fucking Tori if she would give in to him. So why shouldn't I have some fun with Darcy? So this is where, in The Awakening, this is when he's like hitting on her and trying to get her,
and walks her to breakfast.
Yeah, and like doing all that kind of stuff with her. And
he mouth hump Lance's name. It's that part, right?
But he goes, what the hell are you doing? She says, she pushed me back and a wine billed to my throat that I didn't let out. What was her deal? I thought she liked me. I was fucking lovable when I turned the charm on, and last night I'd given her the charm and ground my dick against her multiple times. So what wasn't to love?
Oh, Seth.
And then he's talking about the tongue fucking. He goes, wow, she just screwed the hell out of my name with her tongue. It is so funny to know that he was not joking.
Yeah.
He was being 100%. Like, you think that he's joking in The Awakening because you're not seeing his POV. But my God, that man, like, wasn't joking. And then he starts talking about how the press is going on about it. He's like, no doubt my mom would be losing her shit over it, and there'd be a whole statement from her and the other celestial counselors in the news today. Food first, work later. And then Darcy talks about Lance, and he's like, you just mouth humped another guy's name. And he gets mad at her about that, but we know about all that. And then she's walking down, and it talks about how she pulled her hand from him. And he said he refused to let it go. It was just fun and games. I wanted her to bow to me, but she didn't have to hate me. We could work this out. We could be frenemies with benefits. And then he's like, I just thought after last night, I always felt unequal around other students. The way they revered me or feared me, it made me difficult to form any equal relationships outside of the heirs. But with her and Tori, they just fit. I wonder fucking why.
So cute.
Wonder fucking why. And then he was like, this is when he was kind of like apologizing to her. And he says, my heart beat madly as I bared my soul to her and felt vulnerable for one of the first times in my life. Me and her, there was definite attraction there. I knew it was complicated, but it didn't have to be. Little cute little baby. And then Darcy's essentially like, no.
I don't
He's
trust
like,
you.
I gave her my puppy dog eyes, my biggest, most gleaming, doggish expression that made anyone melt for me. I was adorable. And that is literally how I read that line. I was adorable.
And then she goes, fine.
And she gave in to him about like kind of dating her.
Yeah.
And then Seth talks to his mom, and his mom is an absolute bitch face the whole fucking time and takes the moon from him, the moon march.
Yep.
And he's like, I don't understand what the big deal is. And she says, the big deal, pup, is that you look weak in those images. You look like the girls are in control, leading you all along with your willy winkies. By the stars. I hated when she called my dick a willy winky. Do you have any idea of the compromising position you've put us all in, of the damage control needed here to rectify this? And she says, you were an heir born to rule, and the Vegas are your enemies. You cannot be seen fraternizing with them, especially not when they distract you from detecting a nymph in your near proximity. Do you know how bad this makes you look? And she says, you have severely disappointed me. And she's like, I'm going to punish you. And she says, you are officially banned from attending the family moon march, and you cannot come home again until you have made extensive efforts in rectifying this failure.
Family is such a huge thing for wolves, and she's telling him you cannot come home.
This is why I think you really need to read Ruthless Boys before this, because you will not understand the magnitude of what is happening with the wolves here if you don't read that. Because Dante is not necessarily a wolf, but he was raised by wolves. Both of his parents were wolves. And he has that attachment and love for them. And you get to see that a lot in Ruthless Boys.
It's like the family above all else.
It is.
Yeah.
Ritorno.
Something Morte.
A Morte. Something like
that. Morte, something like that. It's like Death and Back.
Yep. But family is everything to them. And she just took that from him. Like, she cut off his lifeline, essentially.
Yeah. He can't. And they get their powers back by running on full moon. So, like, the moon march being with family, that's a huge thing for the family. It's like a big holiday, almost. And then, she just took it.
And then she just kind of, like, ends it. And, like, he's upset. He said, my breath came furiously and my hands began to shake as panic set in. She couldn't do this. How could she fucking do this? My atlas started ringing and I found the one person I craved to talk to above all others calling. It was Caleb. I was like, this is absolutely adorable. And then,
of course, says, we're fucked. Come to the hollow.
And they go to meet up. He runs by Orion. And Orion is pissed because he was dancing with Darcy. And so he's just kind of shitting on him a little bit. And he's like, I don't get shot down, sir. Because he's like reaching for information about what actually happened with him and Darcy last night.
Being like, did they actually sleep together?
And then he asks him, he says, are you okay?
And Orion's like, fine.
And then Seth says, I'm not okay. I didn't know why, but suddenly I started splitting apart in front of him, and I just needed a hug so bad. So I lunged at him, wrapping my arms around his neck. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And he was like, Orion was pissed. He like pushed him off of him. And then he ran super fast to the King's Hollow, and Caleb was there, and he jumped on him.
Starts nuzzling him.
And he goes, my mom banned me from attending the family moon march. I said into his flesh, he smelled so good. I just wanted to stay here forever, where things almost felt okay. You get a little bit of like the relationship between them in this. Like, so the boys, they all get there and the boys sit down on the couch and Seth literally lays across their laps, nuzzling into Caleb's stomach.
Yeah. He's like somebody please just love me.
And Max is like trying to get a read on Darius because they know.
And Max also, he says, I just checked in on Gruss at the infirmary this morning. Like, she wasn't allowed visitors and I didn't want to make a scene, so I snuck in and I checked that she was still alive and sleeping. Aw, Max.
That was really cute.
Checking on Gruss.
And then Max said, we need to go in hard. When my father called this morning, I heard my mother say they should see if they can get Ellis awakened early just in case I'm not up to the task of defeating the Vegas. And he goes, seriously? I balked and Max nodded, his features drawn with worry. The more this news descended on me, the more I blamed the Vegas for it. They'd lured us in, made us want them, and now look, my brothers were hurting and no one hurt my brothers and got away with it. You fucking douchebags.
Yeah. They're then blaming
Neither one of them wanted to be near you.
They're like, how dare they dance with us and cause all of this chaos?
But this is where they kind of are like coming up with ideas, and they come up with the idea of Max
finding out their fears.
Yes. And then Caleb is like the only one that's like, I don't know, is this really necessary? And Max is like, it's necessary. And Seth is thinking, my mom always told me that rulers didn't always do things they liked, but what was best in the long run. And how is this best in the long run, by the way? I don't understand.
He's thinking he has to prove himself.
And Seth says, and even if my soul was the price I had to pay for that, then so be it. Very similar to what Darius said. And it's like, these boys are literally giving parts of themselves to destroy parts of these girls.
Yeah. Just because of what their parents require of them.
And then we move in to an Orion chapter. He is, Darius is just not talking to him, and he's like, the guardian bond is destroying him.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to find Darius, because Darius is like, stay away from me, he goes to do dark magic.
Yep.
But he realizes that he's in such a bad place that the dark magic would pull him under.
Yeah.
Like he has no way to ground himself right now. So he's like screaming for Darius. And Darius is like, I'm here.
I'm here.
Like he just appeared there. He knew what he was doing. And then they like, so Darius, up to this point, we forgot to mention, had refused to heal himself from his dad beating him.
Yeah.
And this is like, I swung around, dropping the dagger and shooting forward, colliding with him so hard I knocked him back against the wall at his back. A pain curse slipped from his lips as I pinned him in place with one hand, the other sliding up his shirt and seeking out the bruised flesh as I released a wave of healing magic from my body into his. He groaned, his fingers knotting in my hair as my forehead fell against his, but it wasn't enough. He didn't understand what he'd done, and now I had to fulfill this bond as fast as I could or I'd be driven to insanity. I ripped his shirt off of his chest, and he swore as I did the same to my own in the next second, pressing my flesh to his as my magic swelled against my skin and demanded he meet it with his own. He gave in to what I was asking, letting his magical barriers down so our power washed together in one furious storm of energy that made both of us groan. I healed every mark I found on him, seeking out each bruise and cut, the cracks in his ribs, and mending all of it while he clung to me, and the tide of magic rolled between us. Fuck you, I said through my teeth. Why'd you stay away? Why have you done this? And he says, I deserve every wound.
Oof.
That was like, it's heart-wrenching, like seeing Darius do this to himself, but he's also fucking stupid. He made me so angry.
Yeah. They don't, I think they're just trying to do the best that they can in their circumstances. Their parents are the strongest people on the continent.
Are they?
Well, but they don't know how much power the twins have yet. They haven't come into their powers yet.
But like they could.
So they're having their parents.
I get that it's for the story.
They're trying to take the council spots to have their parents telling them what to do. They don't know that they don't see that there's another option yet.
But he, in this, like, so Orion is trying to talk to him to kind of like get through to him and like see what's going on because he's like, what happened? Darius won't tell him.
Yep.
He's like, we have a plan to take care of the Vegas, and he will not tell Orion the plan. So of course Orion is like, oh shit. And then he says, I'm sorry, Lance, looking me in the eyes and clearly meaning it with all of his being. Really, I'm so fucking sorry for everything, but I would do anything to save Xavier from my father, and this is the price. Right
before that, Orion says, it's not that simple, is it? Those girls aren't savage like their father. They're just girls. And then in like little italics it says, and one of them has reached into my chest and taken hold of a cord tethered to my soul. I can't read.
So
this is where you start to see him,
Orion, kind of
being like, well, why do we have to fight the girls? I don't know why we don't have to make them run. They're just girls.
Yes.
Yeah. Sad.
And then we're just kind of hanging out with Orion through his day, talking about how Darius had descended into a dark mood that he couldn't shake. And then he goes into his session with Darcy. And he says, stand on the desk, I commanded, my voice flaring with coercion. How weak are you still? Or are you finally learning to hone that power of yours? She did not move. And he was really impressed.
Yeah.
And then, so he showed up really late, and this is when Darcy was really pissed off at him. Like, and she started.
This is where she thinks
she's interrogating him.
Was planning to kill her and her sister.
And she kind of goes through, and like, it's kind of a back and forth between the two of them. We know this already from the other side, but the whole time, it's fun to get Lance's POV from here.
I have one highlight.
It's fun to get Lance's POV in here because you see that he's like kind of just laughing at her in his head the entire time. She's like, you did this, you did this, you did this.
I have a highlight. It says, her hair was curling from the rain and the sheen of the blue ends like night glass, a rare substance made when a storm dragon's lightning impacted with sand. There was a place out near Alestria where it could be found, but the ruthless Ascoras had claimed ownership of it. I possess one piece of it, though, gifted to me by Gabriel. In Ruthless Boys, Dante shows up to rescue Ryder. Sends lightning into the ground, creating night glass. Yep. I was like, oh, that's from him saving them. That's when they became allies. So cute.
So another thing here is, it's really funny. We know about this from The Awakening, obviously, but when she mentions that he sounds like cinnamon. And
Smells like cinnamon?
yes. And she says, you, covered in blood and smelling like cinnamon, because she's accusing him of killing or trying to kill Geraldine.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, that was a lot to process, and my brows had taken a flight towards my hairline as I picked each of these points apart, focusing on two that perhaps should have been the least relevant, but to me were very interesting. Stupidly hot model. Am I totally fucking deluded and thinking the way she said that sounded like jealousy? Talking about how he was with Francesca. And holy shit, had she been smelling me? A grin ripped across my face, a traitor in itself, but I couldn't stop it as I realized Blue might actually have some interest in me beyond the witch hunt. Cinnamon? Yes, she said firmly, but her cheeks were getting red and she was growing more flustered. It's just really cute, like the back and forth, how he just thinks it's funny. And then he pulls out the article and is like, well, look at this. And she's like, oh. And then she goes, you know what? I'm done with these sessions. I know what I heard, sir. And maybe you didn't attack Geraldine, but I know you're up to something. He says she wouldn't bring her light to me anymore. I'd be alone in the dark again. And with everything that had happened lately, I needed her to stay. So this is the start of him realizing the light that Gabriel is talking about, I think. Because he mentions it again later. And he like finally starts to see it. And she's like, don't bite me. She snarled, stepping back in a rage. You took almost everything from me the other day, and I've only just got my power back. And she really doesn't want him to bite her, and he says, I wasn't going to. And then he is thinking, he's like, my gaze traveled over her beautiful face, and there was only one answer I could really give, because this is when she had asked him, do you want me and my sister dead? Because no matter what happened from here on out, I was sure that I didn't want to see her or her sister die. To see this girl perish would break something in me I didn't even know existed until I met her. No, Blue, I don't.
So cute, my heart.
And then they just go on with their session. And I was like...
It says, right here.
He gave her a book.
She frowned at me like
orders.
she couldn't work out what I was thinking, and honestly, I wasn't even sure if I knew. My head was messed up over Darius, but it was messed up over her too. At this moment in time, I felt torn in two directions, and part of me wanted to lock the door, remain in here for as long as I could, for as long as she would stay. So he's torn in two directions between Darius and the heirs and
I wonder why.
Darcy.
But he had given her a book on orders. And he says she was entirely captivating to me, and I was caught off guard again as her gaze flicked up to meet mine, a smile lifting her mouth that wasn't for me. It was for that book. And the idea that it made her happy had my heart beating to a fierce tune, demanding I show her more. Every favored one in my damn collection.
Oh, like Lance, if you read Ruthless, you also know that he's like a little nerd.
He is.
So he loves books and reads a bunch and just like loved school in general. And so, yeah. He has a bunch of books that he would show Darcy.
And he says, I let myself watch, finding peace in her knee.
In her knee.
I don't know how to say this word.
Which one?
Naivety to our world. And with the chaos raging outside of this room, I allowed myself to indulge in it, because this was surely the calm before the storm, and I had no idea of the damage that was going to be caused when it came. So for now, I'd steal this moment of quiet, finding the ache in my soul lessening as her glow seemed to fill up the entirety of my office. It felt like a truce during a war, our weapons temporarily put down, and in a moment of insanity, I wondered what it would be like to leave them cast aside. Sweet little baby.
So cute.
And then we move into Darius's chapter, where Tori came up and was like, why the fuck are you at my sessions? Come teach me.
Laying in gold like a pirate.
Yeah. And he goes through that, and it's really, really funny. Like, he's like trying so hard not to laugh at her the entire time. And he's also, at this point, he's really trying to get her out of his head. So the fact that she just showed up in his room, like, was really irking him too. There wasn't really anything crazy from this chapter that I was like, oh, I need to point out. Aside from he was really enjoying her eye fucking him.
Yeah. And then he turns into his dragon to...
Yes. And he said, that girl was my downfall in the making. I just had to make sure she never reached that potential.
Rough.
And then we move into one of the most annoying chapters.
Annoying chapters?
I hate Max.
Why? No, I love Max.
I really don't like him.
He likes taking people's
fear.
Okay,
cool.
Because he doesn't want them to be afraid. He doesn't do it maliciously.
except the girls.
All the other heirs are in on it. He's just doing what he thinks is best.
He just violated. This was one of the most, like, yes, they fucked with both of them. Like, they hurt them. What he did was, like, internally violating.
Yes, but also,
like,
I don't know. He's just doing what he thinks he has to do.
And I understand that.
I don't remember. Did we get into the backstory of him and his quote mom?
No, it's not in this book.
Okay.
It's not in this book. But he's not my dude. He's not my favorite. And I understand that he's doing what he's doing out of, like, trying to help people.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like he went the furthest and the hardest on the girls.
Well, I feel like he had to. Like, they had him. It was all on him. They were like, you have to figure out the fears for the plans to go through. Like, it was all rated on him.
But he did it. So, pissed me off.
I mean, he has his family telling him he needs to get them gone. The counselors are telling their boys that they need to get them gone. The heirs are all in on it, and they're like, we need to figure out how to get them to leave. And then they go, hey, Max, you're the one that needs to figure out what their fears are.
But
it's all on him.
We're going into where Max is in his class, and he knows what's going on with Darius.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they all know, but they're not going to approach the subject until Darius wants to talk about it. And he's kind of talking about how he's doing this for Darius. And he goes, which meant one thing and only one thing, and one thing only. We had to succeed in our task now. And if we struck at them, but they've still found the courage and strength of will to stay, well, then we're going to have to adjust our tactics. Nothing these girls do will ever be enough.
Mm-mm.
Like, even if they come into their power and they're, like, super strong, they will never be happy with that. And that right there, I was like,
they could be.
Stop. Right now, I don't feel like they could be. And it really pisses me off. And Max goes into a little bit of, like, what he doesn't like. And he's like, for fuck's sake, it wasn't even about preferring the taste of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so powerful that if I fed on another face happiness for too long, I usually ended up stealing it away and leaving them feeling empty or sad for a while afterwards. I much preferred to get my fix from taking unpleasant emotions away from them and leaving them feeling free from their burdens and happier than they'd been to begin with. Okay, cute. Mm-hmm. And then we go into the part where he took the fears from the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it just... I did not feel connected to Max. Like, I didn't feel like he felt bad for what he was doing.
Let me look. I thought there was a part.
He did say, making guilt well in my chest for a moment before I forced myself to focus on why I had to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents needed us to do it. Fuck off, you and your fucking parents. Solaria was relying on us to ensure it was ruled by the best fae for the job. Fuck you. You're not the best fae for the job.
They don't know that.
It just makes me so angry.
Their whole life, so they didn't even know the Savage King.
Okay.
So, like, all they know is their family ruling and being the counselors, and they grow up with stories of how bad the Savage King was. And then their parents, who they're supposed to fill their seats someday, are telling them that they have to get rid of these girls for the better of Solaria. They just don't know there's a better path yet.
I had the ick so hard this whole chapter. And then he went and fucked a bunch of girls. Although,
because sirens.
Very, very funny. So there was another guy that was like, he feeds lust to girls to get them to want to sleep with him. And he couldn't be mean to this guy outright because he provides power to his family and money. And so the 4 girls were supposed to share with both of them. And Max just continuously sends lust to this guy, and more and more and more and more and more until he comes himself in his pants right outside of Max's door so that he can go in and have all of the girls to himself.
Mm-hmm.
I did giggle at that. That was really funny. And then they go back. The boys get together to kind of talk about what they're going to do to the girls. And Max says the plans seem pretty solid to me. I'd even be able to feel her heartbeat in the water if I maintained a strong connection to it with my power while we did it. It wasn't like she'd be in any real danger. It was just about using her fear.
Whoopsies. And then it escalates.
Like, you think you're so big and bad, and you're just a dick. All of them.
All are.
Yes, all of them. But, like,
yeah, Darius is like, I don't think we could actually kill a Vega. And Seth goes, no, I agreed. But we could make her think we will. Scare her good up until she's begging us to save her. Then we sweep in and we pluck her out of the water. Give her mouth to mouth, maybe a slip of the D. When she pleads for it, then send them running away from here, from the big bad monsters, who she's just not strong enough to face. Simple.
And then they're kind of talking about it. And Caleb is like kind of pushing against the idea. He really doesn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And Seth says, you're only saying that because you want in Tori's panties and you know you won't get in them if you fuck with her like this. Darius growled in a dark warning, his gaze narrowing on Caleb, who didn't even bother to deny it. He goes, so what? I like the taste of her blood and I want to taste a bit more of her too. Doesn't mean I'm suddenly a royalist. Besides, I stand by what I said and my mom agrees too. Them staying on here isn't the end for us, and if anything, it would only offer us up more opportunities to prove that our superior skill and knowledge outmatches their brute strength. Caleb is the only sensible one here.
Yeah. Him and his mom are like, but do we really? Other counselors, do we really need to get rid of them? Don't think we do. We could just prove that we're stronger. And everybody else is like, no, get rid of them.
The only sensible one there. And they all fucking hate on him for it. And I just, it makes me feel icky. And then they start talking about what they're going to do to Darcy. Mm-hmm. And about how they're going to cut her hair off. And Seth says, I volunteer as tribute, trying to make her fall in love with him. I'm going to make her fall in love with me so hard that she'll be panting all over my cock by the night of the party. Then bam, like a ninja with more than just a single weapon between my thighs, I'll strike and cut her hair clean off. Bye-bye hair, bye-bye dignity, bye-bye Vega. That came out so fast. Bye-bye Vega. They didn't, and it's, another thing is like, none of them really liked the idea.
Mm-hmm. They're just doing what they think that they have to do. And none of them are like really,
and then
really like it.
So during this part, when they meet up again, they are in the cafeteria with a silencing bubble around them. Mm-hmm. And so because Seth is like, I'll do it, he decides to start right away, right when they walk in and go to sit down. Mm-hmm. So this is when he does the be my date for the dance little thing. And this is also, I think, when Marguerite and
Kylie
mm-hmm. come up to the boys and are doing their thing. And then you kind of get a glimpse into Darius's dark side. Like he's really an asshole. Mm-hmm. He's not into her. I don't think he ever was really into her aside from fucking her. And like he just makes it very well known. And then they're like giggling about the fact that Seth actually was able to kind of get Darcy interested. And then they're kind of talking about it again. And Darius gets very, very angry with Marguerite because of what had happened. Like she was pushing his buttons really bad. He stormed off, went into his dragon. Mm-hmm. And then they're talking about how he doesn't need to get laid. He needs to get rid of the fucking Vegas so that his father doesn't follow through on whatever threats he's clearly worrying about. Mm-hmm. And then Caleb says, let's just do it then. Then after the party, we can all get back to normal again. That was the end of that chapter. Then we move in.
What really irritates me, at the very end, it says, I was pretty sure the only real peace we were ever going to find was when the Vegas renounced their claim to the throne.
They have.
Not once have they said that they want it. They keep saying, I don't want it. We don't want the throne. We want our powers and money, and that's it.
And we move into kind of why that matters in this Caleb chapter, actually. He talks about it. He says it to her. But I was so looking forward to this chapter. Like, I was ready for it. I wanted to know what Caleb was thinking while he was doing sexual things to her. And it did not disappoint, to be honest. I already knew Caleb was, like, high up there on my list. And this chapter just kind of solidified that for me. Even though I'm not into blondes.
But Caleb Altair.
But you go through like the back and forth of them, like I ran into a crocodile, not a lion, because lions hunt in packs and you never would do that.
And your prey just comes to you. Yeah.
And then something that Caleb says is, you're an heir too, I pointed out. If you make it past the reckoning and complete your training here at Zodiac, then the chances are that we will be in each other's lives for a very long time. And she said, I thought the whole point of your little boys club was to make sure my sister and I didn't make it through the reckoning. Don't you want us gone? And he's like, I'm interested to see how this whole thing would play out. Perhaps you'll fail and be gone by the end of the semester, or perhaps you'll rise up and claim your birthright. Before your parents were killed, our families were their counselors. We always would have held the power beneath you if things hadn't gotten so messy with the Savage King. So maybe you'll fail the reckoning and be sent back to your boring mortal lives, or maybe the trials you're enduring now will only make you stronger in the end and you'll pass. And she was like, so pretty much you're just going to keep going with your boys. He was like, yep.
Pretty much. He's like, I knew that would piss her off more than enjoying it for some other fucked up reason. That he's just going with it.
And then they get into like all of the sexual things. And he's like, I think he's like slightly falling for her.
Mm-hmm.
And he like is getting so much enjoyment and wants so much more from her after all of that. And he's like so upset that they weren't able to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, so that was purely for my benefit afterwards. Mm-hmm. And he's like, my jaw ticked with frustration, though I couldn't claim she was the only one of us who had gotten something out of that. I am so glad that they put this in here because it just helps see that he's being true. Because you heard this in The Awakening. Like, this is nothing new. But just seeing his side of it just shows how, like, genuine Caleb is to me. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of starts talking about how he wants her to stay away from the dance. And he's like, I'm going to try one more time. Like, please don't go. I found myself smiling again, but then my mood dipped as I realized there wasn't likely to be a next time if the other heirs succeeded with their plans for the dance. I didn't even really want to go along with the damn plan. And in a moment of madness, I suddenly wondered if I could just save her from it. They would still strike at Darcy, and maybe that would be enough to force the twins to leave the academy. But if I was being honest, I didn't even really want them to leave anyway. Like... sad. And he just keeps trying. And it's like, she thought he was just trying to get into her pants, but he was legit trying to get her away from the dance and
wondering if
her.
I could just convince her to stay away from it altogether. She was my source after all, so the others couldn't even really get mad at me for protecting her. That was kind of in the job description anyway.
And then Teddy walks in, and we know what happens there. And he goes, until next time, Tori, I promised, and I listened to her pulse pounding harder. I had to hope I was right about there being a next time and a time after that and then another time. Again, because I wanted to do that as often as I could. So what's the plan today, Mr. Caleb? Well, Teddy, I'm about to give you the day from hell for cock-blocking me, and you won't even know which way is up by the time we're done. I love Caleb. Like, he's my...
top boy right now.
Aside from Orion. Because I love him.
Yeah.
And then I think we get
to an Orion chapter.
Yes. And Gabriel is in it again. I was like, Allison,
I didn't remember.
You full on lied.
They all run together. I didn't remember that he had showed up before book 3.
So Gabriel comes again and is like essentially telling him that he is fucking up and his life will end if he doesn't change his ways. And that's really kind of what it took for Orion to be like, oh shit, like he's seen me die. Like, one, not only is this really endangering my life, but I'm also having my friend watch visions of me dying. And that like hit really hard for him.
He said, it's not as bad as it looks. And then Gabe goes, it's actually worse. And if you don't get a grip, things are going to spiral. You have no idea what's in the balance here. And he goes, then tell me then. He goes, go on, oh mighty seer. Tell me what fate I'm fucking up now. And he goes, the best damn one of your life. AKA Darcy.
And he says, you're wasting yourself. You're so fucking special, Lance. If I could only show you, you wouldn't even recognize the person I know you can be. And then he tells him what he has to do tonight. And Lance says, why do you look so sad? He says, because sometimes terrible things have to happen for new paths to arise, and I have to let them. So Gabe this tells us Gabe's seeing what's going on. He knows what has to happen to these girls to be able to...
for them to, like, stand up and...
And it's...
Ugh.
And for Lance.
Yeah.
I think this is a turning point for Lance, too.
Yeah.
And he sees that. And then he tells him that he has to stay away from the girls for 10 minutes. And he says, no, but you'll be fine, Oreo. Just keep doing what I've suggested before now, too. Find the light, yeah? It's closer than you think. And then he sees Darcy, and this is actually extremely cute. He was like, I really just wanted to be in her, like, peripherals. He wanted her to pay attention to him. And so he literally moves up behind her, brushes his fingers along her elbow, and goes, evening. And then energy buzzing in my veins like a drug. The interaction only lasted 2 seconds. And yet, as I walked past her, that energy remained in me, and I held onto it as hard as I could, thinking of the darkness I'd been a slave to only moments ago, and not wanting it to creep in again. Something in me shifted as I realized I was going to try and protect the Vegas from the heir's wrath. There it comes.
Oof. Then
There
we
it
go
comes.
to a Caleb chapter.
Yep. And this is where you find out he was, in fact, trying to save Tori again when he came up and saw her. He also said Seth was always too easily tempted to the dark, taking pranks too far and asserting his dominance over other Fae with a flare of anger, which lashed out harshly at times. Him and Seth have a really special bond. So he kind of knows Seth, I think, a little bit better than the other two heirs. Yeah. And this is kind of where he's talking about how Seth is kind of losing himself. And it's really sad to hear about. And then he's also talking about Darius. He sees Tori. He tries to save her. And then the other heirs pull him over.
Well, he also says, it's not too late to Tori, but he also goes, I wasn't entirely sure what they had planned for her, aside from it taking place at the pool.
They didn't even tell Caleb.
They didn't even tell him everything that it entailed. So he had no idea.
And then the boys come over and ask what they were saying to her. And he was like, this part, I was like, yes, Caleb, yes. He goes, asking her to come back to my room tonight so that I could spend the evening fucking her instead of watching the shit show, which will come now. I admitted, because I'd made it clear enough that I wasn't really on board with this plan anyway, and I wasn't going to lie to my brothers, even if they wouldn't like the truth. Darius scoffed. So I assumed she shot you down, he said cockily, and I just couldn't help myself as I replied. She didn't the last time, though. A growl tore from Darius' throat, and he slammed his drink down on the bar hard enough to shatter it. Yes, Caleb. You fucking tell him. He's a stupid, conceited little dickwad.
He looks around for Seth and realizes that Seth is missing with Darcy, so probably that part of the plan is going as scheduled.
And then Darius gets a call from his dad. And he's like, I take it you won't disappoint me again tonight. Darius says I'll get it done. His dad says, good, because your brother is here in my office with me, waiting to hear from you about your success. Aren't you, Xavier?
Darius? Xavier's voice is pitched with fear.
And so he, at that point, hadn't put a silencing bubble up, and the boys heard him.
Caleb had heard this because he's a vampire.
And then Max says, you see now why we have to do this? And Caleb says, yeah, I get it. And then an excited squeal cut the air to shreds as I glanced around to find Geraldine Gruss rushing through the room. She threw herself at Tori in excitement, and the two of them hugged each other tightly. Thank fuck she's okay, Max breathed beside me, and I turned to him with a faint frown. You've been worrying about Gruss, big boy? I teased, and he instantly tore his gaze from her and shrugged off the concerned look in his eyes. Well, it would have sucked if a nymph got all of her power, he said. Besides, she's one of the only Fae in our class who is even semi-capable of using her magic against us. So?
And then Darius drops his silencing bubble.
And then he says, it has to be this way. Doesn't mean I gotta like it. And this is where Darius takes Tori. He says, last chance, Roxy, take your sister and leave the academy. She says, I'm not going anywhere. And then he takes her and they run to go meet him at the thing. And then we go into Orion's chapter where he pushes Darcy up against the wall. And he says, all I wanted was a few moments in its heat. Was that really such a crime? Yes, it was. But still, Gabriel's words lingered in my mind. And though I knew this was every shade of wrong, it also felt every shade of right. Because Gabriel had also told him to follow his heart. And he's following his heart right now. And I was so proud of Orion right here. Like, he's starting to realize it.
He goes, did she feel this too? Was I tempting her? as tempting to her as she was to me, it didn't seem possible, and yet the look in her eyes said maybe it was.
And then Gabriel had told me to lean towards the light, and there wasn't any fae that burned brighter to me than her. The one man in this book that is like seeing right.
Slowly starting to see it.
And then we go through their back and forth.
He's telling her to stay away from Seth.
And he tells her to go inside, and she doesn't listen. Then we go into Seth's chapter. This made me really sad because I was hoping that he was more remorseful. He was not.
You do get other POVs of the boys later in other books.
He was not remorseful. Icky. And then he literally says, so this is after he had taken Darcy and was starting to walk with her.
Oh, okay.
He says, and the more I looked at her and pinned all my problems on her, the easier it became to turn into my most psycho self.
She and her sister were the reason I was missing out on my family moon. They were the reason I couldn't go home, the reason my mother was cutting me off. More importantly than all of that, the reason I was going to potentially lose my seat on the Celestial Council if I didn't deal with it now. So yeah, I was embracing my inner demons because they liked the taste of pain and suffering and made my smiles a little easier to wear, especially when I cut off my weaker emotions and stuffed them down deep inside of me where not even I could find them. It's what he's been taught his whole life.
I dropped down onto the bench and pulled Darcy down beside me, pressing my face into her hair. My smile fell away as I breathed her in, and something yanked on the inside of my chest. I'm a ruthless fae, a leader, and one day I'll be a lord. This is for the greater good.
My heart.
And then he says he's talking about him and the heirs, and we were all each other had and ever needed, and I realized now they were the only ones who would ever truly understand me. We were in this together, brothers until the bitter end, and they'd have my back no matter what decisions I made because we made them together, a united front, the kings of Solaria. And it was time to do these girls a kindness and destroy them thoroughly, efficiently, and in a way they could never recover from.
He also said, she might run all the way back to the mortal realm, never to be seen again. Though the thought of that didn't sit quite right with me, still, I'd get over it. I had a heart of iron. I was a heartless beast, just like my mom always said I was. Tonight, I would make her proud.
I caught hold of her bun and with one clean slice cut it all off, my fist tightening around it as a ripple of cruel satisfaction pulled in my chest. There, it was done. I'd done my duty. But why was that satisfaction already starting to turn sour? I watched her break, refusing to look away as I faced what I'd done. I could take it. I wasn't going to feel guilty. I'd done what I had to do. This was who I was, and now she was seeing her enemy under the stark light of the moon, and she wasn't strong enough to fight back. So I'd won, and that was all that mattered. Right?
It's him trying to convince himself that it was worth it. That's him being a monster, just like his mom wants him to be, is how it should be.
And then we move into the Orion chapter, and he's like, I had the awful feeling I'd made a mistake in following Gabriel's advice about leaving the twins alone. And he found Darcy on the ground. I should have wanted this, to see her on her knees with her strength dashed to pieces, but instead I felt her pain as sharply as if it were my own. And he's like, he's seeing her for what's going on, and he's like begging her, get up. You're okay. It's not bad. Get up. Get up. In his head, right? He's not saying it out loud, but this is also where he starts to make a joke. And then the biggest part, he says,
were tingling.
he says, she searched my eyes, looking so mistrustful of me that some long-lost part of my personality awoke, trying to offer her something to lighten her mood.
You see this in Ruthless Boys, where he's like a jokester. He's happy. He's not this Lance that we know. And he said, when he says the long-lost part of my personality awoke, and he starts making jokes, so cute.
It made my heart really happy. So he hears, I think, yeah.
They hear a scream.
They hear the scream. And then we move into the to a Darius chapter. This chapter was really hard. He's essentially like, he coerced her to come with him to not talk and not like struggle. And he says she wasn't struggling, still held under the sway of my coercion. All of the things about her which I'd admired most That fire which blazed within her and drew me closer so easily were dampened by the hold I'd stolen on her actions. I hated it. I knew what it was to be forced beneath the heel of another, to have the right to fight back stolen from you, as well as to suffer their cruelty. I was embodying the one man I'd never wanted to become, and yet I couldn't see any other way. So essentially, he's telling himself this whole time, yes, I'm being like my dad, but I have to.
Yeah, he's also like, he says, I swallowed a lump in my throat and I kept going, not looking at her, because if I knew if I looked into those big eyes of hers, I knew I'd see myself reflected in them. And I didn't want to look at the man that I had to become tonight. If I found true fear in her gaze as she looked up at me, then I knew I would really crack, because tonight felt important, the kind of important that meant fate was spinning on a dime, and whichever way the coin had fell could determine everything. Dun, dun, dun.
Bum, 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 bum. Anyway, so they get in there, and he, like, still doesn't even really understand her fear. He's like, well, really was it? Was it just being in the water? Was it the depth? Was it the cold? Caleb had clearly used his speed to beat us here, and Max stood waiting by the diving boards, the two of them looking like polar opposites in their attitude. Max was practically sparking energy, giving himself to the challenge of this, and most likely using his gifts to bolster the emotions he wanted to give off, while squashing any feelings of doubt or guilt out of existence. Caleb wasn't giving anything away as he watched us approach. Something to think about here. She is his source. Caleb is supposed to protect her.
Supposed to. That's why when Orion was like, did you do anything to her? And he's like, no, I didn't even touch her. And he's like, I could still have your fangs ripped out, Caleb, because you're supposed to protect your source. And he just stood by. There's vampire laws. He could legit just get fucked for not stepping in.
And then I feel like a big part of this is when Roxy tells him, or Tori tells him, I can barely swim. Roxy breathed, and it wasn't a plea for help or even anything at all like one. Just a statement of fact, because she wanted to be certain that I knew. She wanted me to understand fully what I was going to do to her if I forced her to do this, and I couldn't deny that it made me pause. I knew what this made me, who it made me, but it wasn't like there were any other choices available to me either. Xavier was there with the monster now, and I had to know how far he'd go to punish me if I failed him again now. I'll drown if I jump in there. Never. The word echoed through me with a finality which I knew to be true. I might be willing to do this to her, to terrorize her and make her hate me more than any other man she knew, but I wouldn't let her die here. That wasn't going to happen. But the fear in her eyes forced me to see all of the worst things in myself, and for the briefest of moments, my resolve cracked. Are you ready to bow to us then? I asked almost desperately, and leave the school behind? Obviously not.
They don't understand that they have nothing to go back to in the mortal realm.
They don't just talk to them. And it's very fucking frustrating.
They don't have anything to go back to.
And then, so Max pushes her to go, and he says, if you change your mind, what will happen with your father? He'll punish me. I felt a fraction of a fear you've been living with under this punishment, and I know for a fact that I don't want you to face it. So tell me, Darius, is she worth what it will cost you to turn back now? My throat thickened with the words I didn't want to have to speak, but as much as I might have hated being the man I was embodying tonight, I knew that I would sacrifice that and more for my brother's safety. Even her. As I made that decision, Max seemed to sense it, and he nodded. And this is when he was trying to make her jump. And then he tells her to jump with his coercion. Obviously, she doesn't. Yeah. He knows that Roxy wasn't the kind of girl to let herself be pushed. So she ran. And then Seth was laughing, blah, blah, blah. I reached out with my power, using the connection I had already formed with the water to search for her in its depths. So he's, like, feeling for her. But they're forcing him to, like, push her back under. And then he says, the stars were screaming inside my skull, mocking, taunting, laughing, cursing me. I wasn't even sure what, but I knew they were watching, judging, changing fate. I rolled my eyes so many times. It's like, you stupid, dumb mother effer.
Look what you're doing.
This was so fucked up. The worst thing I'd ever done at my father's command, and I hated to think what more he might demand from me now. It, like, I also hear, like, they're seeing that she's showing her power. Like, they're fighting 2-on-1, sharing power so that she cannot get through this ice.
It's not even a 1-on-1 faith fight anymore.
And they're, like, fighting girls that don't know how to use their power.
It says, if she managed to break through that ice, then this would backfire spectacularly. She'd prove just how powerful she was by breaking free of us and overcoming her fear after all. And I couldn't imagine my father's wrath if that were to happen. So Darius and Max start sharing power.
They don't let her come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move into the Orion chapter. And he pulls Tori out. Dives in the water. And he's like, come on, you're a fighter, Tori Vega, wake up. And then we kind of go through what he's facing and like what he's going through while he's bashing the heirs' faces on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I laughed really hard when he destroyed Seth's face. And then like the bigger part of this is he's like, how the fuck could they do this to these girls? They would have killed Tori.
Yeah, it says, this is what Orion says when he pulls her out. As I knelt on Tori's other side and pressed a hand to her forehead, her skin was so cold and her heartbeat was not reaching my ears. I wasn't sure if that was because Darcy's was beating so loudly or because it wasn't there. But either way, I had to act fast if I could possibly bring her back from this. Literally, Orion saves her life.
And he says, the celestial counselors would back them to their graves. Even if Tori had died, they would have found a way to make it look like an accident, protected their precious little prodigies. And in the face of that power, I felt useless. Because what was the point in rules and codes and morals if they meant jack shit to the people ruling the world? And it made me realize I was standing in front of 4 people who would one day hold the fate of Solaria in their hands. And this one act was enough to make me doubt my desire for that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like second guessing the heirs.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, he starts beating them in. And he says, are you going to lie to my face too? His tone was mocking and designed to shut me out, making the guardian bond flare sharply inside of me, demanding I fix things between us. But fuck him. He was the one who did this. I wasn't going to pander to him, even if the bond destroyed me from the inside out. One thing that they didn't say in here is when he says, you're becoming like your father.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in here. And I was like, I wonder if they just forgot about it or like what that was.
And then there's a scream, so they run out.
And then they see the body.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't see the girls pull the card, which I was curious if he did. He didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they go, Gabriel comes. He says, Gabriel, I gasped, gripping his shoulder hard. What's going on? You need to go, he said, panic flashing in his eyes. Go where? I asked in confusion. To Darius. Now, Lance, he said frantically. He's about to go home to kill his father. The guardian bond will draw you to him the moment the fight begins, and you'll die in the crossfire before Darius is brought to his knees at Lionel's feet. So we go into a Darius chapter where he went back to his room, and all he sees in the mirror is his dad. And it's like really fucking with him. After what he'd done to Tori, he was breaking inside.
Yeah.
So he's like, I was filled with the most sickening certainty that I'd done something I would never come back from. And he comes to the conclusion that the only way he'd get out of this is by killing his father.
Mm-hmm.
That would save Xavier. That would save him from being under his foot. It would save Lance. And he thinks that this is the best point for that. And Lance appears, destroys his stardust that he was about to use. And he says, you can't challenge your father like this. Gabriel had a vision about the way it will turn out. You won't win. He says, I will. He says, I can't let you lose that fight. Gabriel cannot predict my future. I barely know that half-plucked turkey. There's no way he could see the outcome of my actions. He saw me die. Orion hissed, cutting me off and sending panic slicing through my veins. Liar, I breathed, but I could see the truth in his eyes. You're not ready. Then when? I don't know. You saw what I did tonight, he rasped, what I became because of him, and you know it won't stop there. He knows now how far he can push me all the time. He uses Xavier as a bargaining chip. And every time I do something like that, it will chisel away at the man I want to be, piece by fucking piece, until I become the very thing he wants me to be.
He says, you'll beat him, and then Darius says, and what about the creature I'll become in the meantime? What happens when I can no longer stomach the sight of my own reflection? What happens when the man you want so desperately to destroy Lionel Acrox ends up being just as bad as him in the effort that it takes to stand against him?
And then he says, and the only thing I found among the mass of gray, because he transformed and went into the clouds, was the look in Roxy Vega's eyes as she saw the worst in me, and I felt my entire life shatter, like breaking glass around me. Perhaps I was always destined to be her monster, but I found I hated that fate with far more passion than I'd ever be able to hate her.
Ugh.
And that is the end.
Okay, so any other theories after reading or finishing the boys' perspectives?
Okay. I forgot I told you about these already.
Mhm.
Max and Geraldine are mates.
Okay.
Max and Geraldine are going to die.
Because you already suspect that.
Yes.
Geraldine.
So I did get sorry. I'm so sorry. If you haven't read the books and you're reading along with us, I'm so sorry.
Spoiler.
I think Max and Geraldine are going to die.
Yeah.
Both of them. Like, they're the only people that will be impactful enough, but not too impactful to really destroy you. Like,
interesting.
you can't kill a twin. You could try, but I feel like that would derail the entire series.
Story.
You could kill a mate like Orion or Darius. Again, I just feel like that would totally derail one of the twins. Like, I just feel like they won't go that route. I think Seth means something to Darcy, and I'm really curious to see how Caleb and Tori's relationship turns out, because they have already gone sexual. So where is that going to move with? I know that she's Darius' mate. So, like, how is that going to work? I'm very curious to see what happens there. But that was my biggest thing from that. When I read the part where Max was talking about her at the dance, I was like, oh, there it is. Because they've talked about it before, where he like went and visited her in the infirmary, and he like,
always talks about her when she walks into a room,
and it's always sweet. Like, looking at her with longing is what I imagine.
And then whenever any of the guys question it or see it, then he turns into a dick and he's like, ha ha ha, fucking gross, royalist, blah 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 blah. Makes fun of her to her face, but secretly is like, oh, gross.
Yeah, I think those were the only other two that I was like theorizing about. Okay, so overall though, I still think Francesca's bad.
Okay.
Don't like
Diego.
her. Well, yeah, obviously we know that.
How do you think book 2 is going to go with the twins coming out of this?
I'm scared.
Try on their life, trying to get them to leave. How do you think that they're going to react? I'm
very, very scared. I'm nervous for them, for how they're gonna like react to this, because they seemed pretty, like, the guys did a good job.
Yeah.
They broke them down pretty bad. I think it's definitely going to be a trial for them, like, trying to reach up, come back, and realize that they aren't what they did to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm scared. I think it's going to be
a little rough.
Hard to read. The boys still being mean to them after this.
They haven't even made it to the reckoning yet.
The reckoning isn't until the third book.
This has all happened within like...
This was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks.
They had one weekend. That was it.
No, this is the weekend. So they had the week, the weekend, the week, and now the dance.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They had one.
Disgusting that was only 2 weeks. Those boys are douchebags. But
they also don't even know them really yet. It's only been 2 weeks.
Stop defending them.
No, I will defend them with my life because I love all 4 of them.
I hate Max.
I love all 4 of them.
Seth has a little bit of sympathy because I understand werewolves.
Mom. Making him into like his emotionless. Him saying, I have to push my emotions down. I have to become the monster that my mom wants me to be.
Sad. But dick.
Ugh.
They're all stupid. They're all dumb. They don't know how to talk to people.
They don't know how to
communicate
or push back against their parents. They're doing exactly what mommy and daddy tell them to do.
But yeah. So I am excited to get into book 2. I'm excited to really get into the story again, because this was just
the same thing, but just
over again.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I'm so excited for you to read book 2 because this is where we see the girls get a little bit of revenge.
I am excited for that too.
So good.
But
something that they do in book 2, the effects of it go all the way past book 9.
Good.
Like the rest of their lives.
Good.
It's so good.
But yeah, so that is as told by the boys. The like retelling of the first book. We get to see it from the boys' perspective.
Yep.
I gave this 5 stars. I liked this way more than the first book, to be honest. I really am connecting with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them.
Even if they're assholes.
So my rating is still the same. Max is the lowest. Fuck him. So Orion, Caleb Darius, Seth Max. We'll see how it is at the end of the next couple chapters of book 2. But if you enjoyed this, guys, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye, guys.
Bye.
When you look my way, it gave me shivers.